Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I want to talk to you tonight the way I actually talk to myself. When the lights are off and the room is quiet and there's no camera to impress. I'm standing in a doorway of my life and I can feel the weight of it in my chest. Like the pause between a deep breath in and a deep breath out. I haven't picked a date yet. I haven't even picked a city, but I can feel the shape of my future getting real. And with it comes a strange mixture of peace and trembling, like the calm you feel right before the rain starts. And because life has a way of testing your heart right when you try to live honestly, I was invited to my ex-girlfriend's house. I went, and it didn't end well. I didn't go to reopen anything. I didn't go to compare past and future as if love is a scoreboard that the internet can keep. I went because sometimes you need to stand in a room that once held your old self and see if there's anything you still need to carry forward. I went because closure is not a signature on a memory. It's a practice. I thought I was ready. I thought I was strong. I thought I could simply say hello, be kind, and leave as the same man who walked in. But rooms remember you. Walls remember your laughter and your silence. And the small kitchen where we used to eat 2 late dinners remembered me before I knew how to be gentle with my own heart. It was one of those crisp evenings where the sky is thin and the city feels like it's holding back 1,000 tiny secrets. I brought nothing with me but a clean shirt and a promise to myself. Be honest, be calm, and leave early. When she opened the door, she smiled the way people smile when they've rehearsed being okay. I smiled back with the same costume. We sat, and the room felt smaller than I remembered. Like time had pressed everything closer together. There was tea, there were polite updates, there was the awkward choreography of moving around a table without bumping into yesterday. And then the conversation took that quiet turn that always comes. The one where you can hear your heartbeat in your throat and you can feel the old map of your life trying to redraw itself. She asked if I was happy. Not the kind of happy that makes good photos, but the kind that makes you less afraid at 3 a.m. When I said I was trying to be, she looked at me the way you look at someone who's halfway across a bridge in the middle of a storm. I told her the truth. I'm learning that happiness is not a performance, it's a practice. It looks like sleeping enough, calling my mom back, learning to listen when I want to defend myself, eating in silence sometimes so my soul can catch up. I told her I've been volunteering quietly. No cameras, no announcements, just showing up and lifting boxes with people whose names I'm still learning. I said, I wanted my life to be less about applause and more about attention to the small, unshiny things that make a day feel worthy. There was a picture on her shelf of us from a summer that now feels like a story I once read. My hair was different, her laugh lines were younger, and I thought about how easily we confuse familiarity with destiny. She asked about my family, so I told her, my mom's voice is still the safest sound I know, even when she worries too much. I told her my dad has this way of watching me that makes me feel 12 and seen at the same time. I told her my brothers in BTS keep me honest in ways the world doesn't see. How RM will ask a question so precise. It's like he's moved a mirror a few degrees to catch the light better. How Jin can say one line that turns a heavy moment into air. How Suga's quiet notices what the loudness hides. How J-Hope's joy is planned, not accident. How Taehyung can stand next to you in silence and somehow that silence becomes a prayer. How Jimin, especially Jimin, has this gift of sitting with your pain until it softens enough to speak. We're more than a group, we're a grammar. Each of us teaches the others how to form better sentences with our lives. She asked about ARMY and I told her the truth that always makes my voice shake. I would not be here without them. Not just in the career way everyone says. I mean in the way a stadium of people can catch a person who's falling, even if he looks like he's flying. Their letters aren't letters, they're lanterns. They tell me about their graduations and their grief and their little victories like drinking water and getting out of bed. and they remind me that showing up is not small. Showing up is how you heal a life. Maybe that's why the conversation started to hurt, because I could feel the past tugging on the threads I've been carefully weaving into a future that makes sense. She asked if I still wrote late at night. I said yes. She asked if I still kept the voice memos of melodies on my phone labeled with names nobody but me would understand. I said yes. She asked if I still run when my thoughts get loud. I said yes. She smiled and said, some parts of me never change. And I wanted to say the part of me that loved her once didn't change either. But love is not a fossil. It's a river. And rivers keep moving. Here's where it didn't end well. And I want to say this carefully because I don't believe in turning people into headlines just because a story hurt. She asked if I was sure about what I want now, about the person I want to build a life with, about the quiet promise I've been making to myself to love in a way that is steady, not spectacular. She asked if I remembered how we planned once and how the plan slipped through our fingers. Not because we were careless, but because sometimes timing is a teacher that refuses to pass you early. I said I remembered. I said I honor that history. She said she had imagined that maybe in another season we could try again, and the room felt like it tilted. I didn't expect that sentence. It landed with the softest tone and the loudest echo. I thought about how easy it would be to confuse tenderness with permission. I thought about the person I'm becoming and the person I used to be. I thought about how every yes is a no to something else, and how the kind of life I want requires me to love straight, not in loops. So I told the truth. I said I'm grateful. I said I hope her days are full of people who see her the way she deserves to be seen. I said I'm walking towards something that asks me to be brave in new ways, and going back would be a different kind of fear, pretending to be comfort. She nodded. But the nod was a kind of breaking. You can only see if you've broken that way too. We stood up at almost the same time, like choreography we didn't practice, and I helped wash the cups even though it wasn't necessary. I've learned work can be a blessing when words can't find the right size. When I put the cup on the rack, I noticed a small hairline crack along the handle. It was still whole, still useful, still able to carry warmth, but it needed a gentler hand. I don't know if the cup always had that crack or if I was just seeing more clearly, but I understood something about myself in that moment. Not everything broken is unusable, but you have to carry it with awareness. On the ride home, the city lights blurred into a steady silver, and my heart felt like someone had retuned it half a step down. I didn't regret going. I regretted underestimating how memory can wear a familiar perfume and convince you the past is standing in your present. When I got to my place, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and let the quiet catch up. I remembered advice from RM about naming your feelings like you introduced them to a room so they stop acting like strangers. So I said them out loud, softly. Gratitude, sadness, relief, worry, hope. Taeyong would have told me to turn off the lamp and just listen to the dark for a minute. J-Hope would have told me to drink water and eat something real. Jin would have told me a joke too corny to repeat and somehow I would have laughed. Suga would have said, write it down. And Jimin would have said, Hyung, let's walk. Even if it was midnight. Even if we didn't say much. So I wrote. I wrote that I want love that is built the way you build muscle. Repetition, good form, enough rest. I wrote that I don't want to perform intimacy anymore. I want to practice it. That means answering the text even when I feel awkward. That means asking better questions. That means saying I'm sorry while the wound is still small. I wrote that I believe in a future where home is not a place with the perfect aesthetic, but a person I can cook eggs with on a boring Tuesday, where we can read in silence without performing closeness for anyone, where I can be intense without being unkind and she can be tired without apologizing. I wrote that faith is not a summary of beliefs for me, it's a way of walking. It's how I try to honor my parents, how I try to be a brother who carries more than he complains, how I try to remember that talent is a seed someone else paid for and I'm just the gardener. The next day, I called my mom, and she did exactly what moms do. She listened, she worried, she asked if I ate, And she reminded me that endings are rarely tidy. She says, sometimes the heart needs to sit in a messy room for a while before you can clean it. My dad told me I did the right thing and then told me to double knot my shoes before running, because the last time I tripped, he almost had a heart attack watching the video. We laughed, and I realized laughter doesn't erase ache, but it gives ache a softer chair. I went to the practice room and let the mirrors be witnesses. Dancing has always been where my body tells the truth. My mouth is too slow to find. I played a track I haven't released and let my feet and hands argue and agree with each other until sweat felt like forgiveness. Somewhere in the middle of it, I remembered a line I heard from a volunteer leader at the community center. We practice the person we hope to be when nobody is filming. That line stayed with me, and I think it's the only way I know how to move forward now. I'm not trying to win love like a trophy. I'm trying to become someone who loves well when it's ordinary. It didn't end well that night. Not because someone was cruel. Not because the past is shame. It didn't end well because sometimes the kindest truth still hurts. And because choosing a future often means placing flowers on a memory and walking away before sunset. But I'm learning that a door can close without turning into a wall. I'm learning that saying no to yesterday can be a deeper yes to tomorrow. I'm learning that the man I want to be for the woman I will promise my life to is not built in sudden fireworks. He's built in the way I answer the phone, in the way I wash the cup with the hairline cracked, in the way I say thank you to the staff who keep us moving when we're tired, in the way I look at each of my brothers and tell them I love them like it's not the 100th time. If you're listening and you've got your own room with old echoes, I hope you know this. You don't have to hate your past to move beyond it. You can honor it without living there. You can be gentle with the version of you who didn't know yet. And when the invitation comes to revisit the place you survived, you can go if you must. But you're allowed to leave early and choose the life that asks you to become honest, steady, present. I believe love can be simple without being easy. I believe the best promises are not loud, they're consistent. I believe the future I'm walking toward is worth every quiet courage it demands of me. So tonight I'm here, a little emptied out and a little filled back up, telling you the truth, the way I promised myself I would. I was invited to my ex-girlfriend's house, and it didn't end well, and that's okay. Not because pain is noble, but because honesty is kinder than hope that points backward. I want a love that lets me bring my whole self, the driven parts, the tired parts, the praying parts, the playful parts, and meets me with the same. I want to be the kind of husband who knows how to hold a silence without trying to fix it. Who knows how to say I was wrong without making it a performance. Who knows how to protect a home without building a cage. I want to be the kind of man who keeps practicing when the camera is off. If anything I said helps you carry your own story with a little more care, then this was worth saying out loud. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what you've learned about love when nobody is watching. And if tonight you're standing in your own doorway, between a breath in and a breath out, I hope you know you're not alone. The best is not behind you. Keep walking. I want to tell you something that's been sitting in my chest for a long time. Something I never imagined I'd have to face again. A few weeks ago, I was invited to my ex-girlfriend's house. At first, it felt like a casual gesture, something polite. But the moment I stepped inside, the air changed. Memories I thought I had neatly folded in boxes I could ignore started pressing against my ribs. The room smelled like coffee and faint perfume, a combination so familiar it almost hurt. We exchanged hellos, smiles that were careful and measured, the kind that say, I remember, but I won't let the past define us. I tried to sit still, to control my heartbeat, to not let nostalgia slip into regret. But it was already there. I could see her in the little gestures that had once drawn me, in the way she arranged the chairs, the way her hands lingered on the teacups as if she was making them tell a story, the way her eyes caught the light and reflected it back gently, reminding me of all the mornings we had thought would last forever. I realized immediately that this wasn't just a casual meeting. This was a test of who I had become and whether I could hold myself steady in a room full of echoes. I told her about my family first. My mom, who calls 3 times a day, who worries about the smallest things, who I know prays for me even when I don't listen. My dad, who's careful with his words, who has that way of seeing me as both grown and still his little boy. I spoke about my brothers in BTS, how they anchor me, challenge me, and teach me every day what it means to carry responsibility with humility. She listened quietly, nodding at times, asking questions at others. I could feel the weight of my own words. I told her how ARMY has shaped me, not just the cheers, but the letters, the stories, the trust that strangers place in me by letting me into the most vulnerable parts of their lives. I told her that all these connections, big and small, have made me who I am, and yet they aren't enough to fill the spaces left by the people who matter most. The ones I've lost and the ones I've left behind. And she listened, really listened, as if my words weren't about performance, but about truth. Then came the part I knew would hurt the most. She asked me if I was happy. I could have given the answer. I thought people wanted to hear about music, about success, about the lights and the stages. But I said no, not really. I said I was learning how to love myself, how to show up for the people I care about, how to be present in ways that don't demand applause. She nodded, and the room felt colder for a second, because I realized she understood exactly what I meant. I remembered the times we used to laugh at nothing and argue over the silliest things, and I understood that love, real love, isn't about recreating the past. It's about moving forward while carrying what you need from yesterday. Nothing more, nothing less. We spoke of the paths we've chosen since then. I told her about the mornings I spend helping people quietly, the evenings I spend reflecting, the nights I spend dancing alone in a studio just to feel my body remind me I am alive. I told her about Jimin, about Taehyung, about RM, about Jin, about Suga, about J-Hope, how every interaction with them shapes me, forces me to confront myself in ways that are uncomfortable but necessary. And she listened without judgment. And then she asked if there was still a part of me that belonged to the memories we had made together. I didn't lie. I told her yes. And I told her that acknowledging that memory doesn't mean I want to go back. It means I am learning how to carry it without letting it weigh me down. That's when the tension settled in, the kind that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. She mentioned the possibility of what might have been if timing were different, if the years hadn't pulled us in different directions. I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to say so many things, that I am grateful, that I honor the past, that I am walking toward a life that asks me to be braver, more honest, more present. But the words that came out were simpler, cleaner. I said, I am grateful. I said, I wish her the best. I said, I hope she finds people who see her the way she deserves to be seen. We rose almost simultaneously, a silent choreography that made my heart ache in the quietest way. I helped clear the dishes, even though it wasn't necessary, as if in that act I could measure the distance between what was and what will be. I noticed a small crack in a teacup hairline, fragile, but still whole. I realized in that moment that some things, like some relationships, like some pieces of yourself, carry fractures and imperfections, but can still hold warmth. It struck me how easy it is to forget that things don't need to be perfect to be meaningful. On the way home, the city lights blurred into streaks of white and orange, and I felt like I was moving through both past and present at the same time. I didn't regret going. I regretted underestimating how powerful memory can be when it lingers in the familiar, how much courage it takes to face it without trying to rewrite it. I sat on the floor when I got home and let the silence wrap around me. I named what I was feeling: gratitude, sadness, relief, worry, hope. Each word hung in the air like a small lantern, illuminating the corners I usually ignore. I thought of my brothers and friends, of the voices that ground me, of the people who love me without needing me to be more than I am. I danced in the studio later, letting my body speak the things my mouth cannot. Every movement became a reminder that life is practice, that love is practice, and that being present is practice. I realized that this visit to her house, though painful, was a form of learning. It reminded me that the life I am building, the love I am preparing for, requires honesty, courage, and consistency. It didn't end well, not because of anger or betrayal, but because love real, transformative love demands clarity. Sometimes clarity hurts, and sometimes leaving is the only way to honor both the past and the future. I am learning that endings don't have to be walls, they can be doors. And I am learning that walking through those doors, even when it aches, is the only way to arrive at a place where I can show up fully to the person I will love, to the people I care about, to the life I hope to build. If you're listening and you face echoes from a room you once called yours, know this. It's okay to feel everything at once. It's okay to remember without reliving. It's okay to leave with your heart heavier and lighter at the same time. Life asks us to carry our history while stepping into the future. And tonight, I am carrying mine with open hands, ready to meet the love that awaits me with patience, honesty, and all the quiet courage I can muster. I want to take you deeper into that night, into every detail that makes it linger in my chest like a song I can't stop playing. After leaving her house, I didn't go straight home. I walked the streets near the studio, the city breathing around me, headlights slicing the darkness, and I realized how much of myself I had left in that space, in those years, in the laughter and the fights and the quiet moments we shared. Each step felt like a negotiation between the person I was and the person I'm trying to become. I kept thinking about Jimin, how he watches the world with this mix of softness and strength, and I could feel a little of his patience in me as I tried to untangle my thoughts. Taehyung would have told me to take a photo of the skyline and let it remind me that perspective matters. RM would have reminded me to speak the truth even if it makes the night longer. Jin would have found a joke in the rhythm of my footsteps, and Suga would have silently nodded at the logic of letting the silence teach me. J-Hope would have hummed a beat I could follow, and I realized, somehow, all of them were walking beside me without moving an inch. When I got back to the studio, I lit the lamp in the corner and looked at the mirrored wall. My reflection was fragmented by the soft shadows, and I thought about how the same light can reveal and conceal at the same time. I put on a track I had recorded months ago, one that I had never released because it felt too raw, too close, and I danced not for anyone else, not for a camera, not for applause, but so I could feel my own hands and feet translate the storm inside me into movement. Each gesture reminded me that even in brokenness there is flow. Even in endings, there is a rhythm. I thought about the cracks in that teacup, the way it could hold warmth despite its fragility. And I realized I wanted my love to be like that. Honest, imperfect, and steady. I called my mom later, letting her voice wash over the tension in my chest. She didn't judge me. She just asked the gentle questions that mothers always know, to ask the ones that make you pause, the ones that make you confront what you're feeling. My dad gave a quiet chuckle, telling me to tie my shoes properly and reminding me that life is a series of small precautions that add up to safety. Their words were simple, but they held gravity because they reminded me that love isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it is mundane, patient, and persistent. I thought about Army and the hundreds of letters I had read that day, each one a testament to care, to watching someone grow, to holding space for someone you may never meet. I felt connected in a way I hadn't realized I had been starving for. That night, I wrote pages and pages about the love I want, about the man I want to be for that love. I wrote about the person I hope to be when I wake up, when I answer messages, when I practice being present. I wrote that I want intimacy that is deliberate, that doesn't demand perfection, that isn't performed for anyone else, but is lived for both people involved. I wrote about the small acts of care, the texts sent at odd hours, the breakfasts made quietly, the willingness to apologize before the wound grows. I wrote about faith as action, as a way of moving through the world with attention and kindness, honoring the people who shaped me and the people I hope to become. I thought about my ex-girlfriend again, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with a kind of solemn respect. She had been a mirror of a younger version of myself, a version that I had now outgrown, that I needed to leave behind to step into what comes next. It didn't end well because it couldn't. Love that isn't aligned with who you are now cannot be resurrected to fit a future you're building. But it ended in the only way it could honor both of us. With honesty, with care, with a quiet recognition that the door closing is also the act of opening to something that waits. I spent the rest of the night in the studio, letting the silence teach me, letting the mirrors witness the man I am becoming. I thought about Jimin again, and how he would sit next to me silently, how we would share thoughts without needing to fill the spaces with words. I thought about Taehyung and the way he observes the world with wonder that makes you see the ordinary in extraordinary ways. I thought about RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, all of them holding a mirror up to my soul in ways the public never sees. And I understood that the life I want, the love I am preparing for, doesn't need validation from anyone else. It only needs presence, courage, and practice. By the time morning came, I had learned that walking away is not failure. Walking away is a deliberate act of fidelity to the person I'm trying to be. I had learned that love is not a record of past victories or regrets. It's a practice that demands honesty, patience, and the willingness to be seen without adornment. I had learned that the past can exist alongside the future without poisoning it, and that some invitations, even those wrapped in nostalgia and longing, are meant to remind you of how far you've come, not to pull you back. I left the studio that morning feeling strangely lighter, the cracks in my chest and the cracks in the teacup now carrying light instead of shadow. I realized that the life I am moving into, the love I hope to nurture, is built from these quiet lessons. Consistency over performance, authenticity over spectacle, practice over perfection, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that steadiness, that quiet pulse of something real waiting for me on the horizon, something I could meet with, all my heart ready and unguarded. I know now that the visit didn't end well in the conventional sense, but it ended in a way that matters the way the truth always wants to be met. And I will carry that truth with all its ache and clarity as I continue to walk toward the love that asks for my full presence, the family that asks for my attention, and the life that asks for my courage. Everything I want, everything I hope for is waiting on the other side of honesty, and I will show up for it every day. I woke up the next morning with the city still quiet, the kind of quiet that presses into your chest and makes you notice every heartbeat. I poured myself some tea, sat by the window, and watched the light shift across the skyline, thinking about what had happened the night before. I kept turning over her words in my head, the ones that had landed gently but firmly, reminding me that some things aren't meant to be resurrected, that some doors close not to punish, but to protect the future we're not ready to meet yet. I thought about how every person in my life had shaped me, my parents, who taught me patience and courage in the smallest gestures, my brothers in BTS, who reflect parts of myself I hadn't seen, and Jimin, whose quiet presence has taught me that stillness can be an act of strength. I realized I had been holding on to the past in a way that made it more solid than it needed to be, more permanent than truth requires. The visit had reminded me that love isn't about rekindling what once was. It's about honoring what is and trusting what's coming. I thought about all the moments I had shared with her, the laughter, the arguments, the long silences that were sometimes louder than words, and I understood that each memory had a place in shaping who I am now. But they weren't a blueprint for what comes next. They were lessons. And lessons are meant to be carried lightly, like feathers in your pocket, not weights around your neck. I spent the day reflecting on how I want to show up in the world moving forward. I thought about the people I care for, the fans who trust me with their stories, the friends who watch my back, and the family who keeps me grounded. I realized that the love I want, the kind that will build a life not just a moment, requires me to be fully present, fully honest, and fully myself. That means acknowledging my own cracks and imperfections, learning from them, and showing up with intention every single day. I thought about the small acts that matter. Answering messages thoughtfully, showing kindness without expectation, listening before speaking, practicing patience when it feels easier to be frustrated. I realized that this is how love becomes sustainable, how relationships survive the ordinary trials that life inevitably brings. Later, I found myself back in the studio, letting the music guide my thoughts. I danced slowly, deliberately, feeling every movement in my body as if it were a conversation with my own heart. The mirrors reflected not just my physical movements, but my internal state, the tension, the release, the quiet determination to keep moving forward. I thought about how dancing has always been a way to translate feelings. I can't yet articulate a way to practice being in my own skin. And tonight, every step carried a promise to approach love not as a performance, not as an obligation, but as a discipline of the heart, a daily practice of patience, presence, and integrity. In the quiet moments between songs, I allowed myself to think about the future. I imagined a love that feels simple but profound, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the courage to grow together. I imagined a life where the past exists as context, not constraint, where memories are neither a prison nor a crutch, but a foundation from which to build something new. I understood that this kind of love requires courage, not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but the steady, consistent kind that asks you to show up fully even when no one is watching. By the time the city began to stir, I felt a shift inside me. The heaviness from the night before had softened, replaced by a quiet clarity. I realized that the visit didn't fail. It performed its function. It reminded me that walking away can be an act of fidelity to yourself, that ending something doesn't erase its importance, and that love, real love, asks for honesty above comfort. I felt gratitude for the experience, for the memories, for the lessons, and for the courage it took to face the past without losing sight of the future. I spent the rest of the day organizing my thoughts, writing them down in my journal, capturing the nuances of the night, the lessons learned, and the intentions I want to carry forward. I thought about the kind of partner I hope to be someday. Someone who listens, who supports, who accepts both the light and dark parts of their beloved, who doesn't demand perfection but encourages growth. I thought about how this vision will influence every interaction I have, not just in romantic relationships, but with family, friends, and the army who have given me so much without asking for anything in return. That evening, I went for a quiet walk, letting the cool air touch my face. I thought about the choices I've made, the paths I've walked, and the future I am intentionally shaping. I realized that love is not a single event, but a practice, an ongoing commitment to being better, to showing up fully, to being present in each small, ordinary moment. And as I walked, I promised myself that I would honor that practice, that I would carry the lessons of the past without letting them dictate my future, and that I would meet the love waiting for me with courage, honesty, and an open heart. By the time I returned home, I felt a peace that had been absent for years. The night hadn't ended as I might have hoped in my younger self's imagination, but it had ended in a way that matters truthfully, gently, and with the promise of a future built on authenticity. I understood that some doors close so others can open, and that walking through the right doors requires awareness, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. The past is honored, the present is embraced, and the future is a practice I am committed to showing up for every day. And so I sit here reflecting on the lessons, holding the gratitude, carrying the ache and clarity, ready to continue building the life I envision. The visit didn't end well. Yes, but it ended, honestly. And honesty, I am learning, is the foundation for everything that matters. Love, connection, growth, and the courage to meet the world and the person I hope to love with a full, open heart. I spent the following days in quiet reflection, letting the echoes of that night settle into the corners of my mind without forcing them away. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the way the room had held us, both her polite smile, my hesitant greetings, the weight of what wasn't said hovering between us like invisible dust in a sunbeam. It wasn't bitterness that stayed with me, it was recognition, a deep awareness that some chapters are meant to end even if the story they contain has not fully unfolded. I thought about the kind of person I want to be, not just for love, but for my friends, my family, my brothers in BTS, and the millions of fans who trust me with pieces of themselves I can't see. I want to be someone who carries both joy and sorrow without fear. Someone who shows up with honesty, presence, and care every single day. I started noticing the small ways life asks for attention. When Jimin called to check in, his quiet tone reminded me that friendship is not a series of grand gestures, but of consistency and listening. Taeyoung's random text asking about my day reminded me that curiosity is an act of love. Arm's thoughtful questions pushed me to articulate my intentions clearly. Jin's humor broke the tension when I was caught in reflection. Suga's nods of understanding reinforced that silence can hold just as much meaning as words. J-Hope's laughter reminded me that joy is contagious and necessary. Each of them showed me how relationships are built in everyday moments, not only in dramatic declarations or performances. I returned to my volunteer work with a renewed perspective, lifting boxes, preparing meals, helping people I would never meet again. I found myself thinking not about recognition or social credit, but about practicing presence, compassion, and attentiveness. Each action became a mirror, reflecting the kind of partner I hope to be someday. I realized that love is not just a feeling, it is a discipline, a choice to act in ways that align with your values, even when it's inconvenient or unseen. The lessons I carried from my visit to her house began to crystallize into principles I could live by. Honesty over comfort, courage over avoidance, presence over distraction. One evening, I sat alone in the studio, letting the soft hum of the city settle around me. I thought about the memories we shared and allowed myself to feel them fully, not to cling, not to wish them back, but to acknowledge them as part of the journey that has led me here. The warmth I felt in that recognition was strange and comforting, like sunlight on a window pane that filters through old glass. I wrote in my journal about the cracks in relationships and in people, about how some fractures are not weaknesses, but invitations to practice gentleness, understanding, and patience. I realized that in order to love well, I have to allow both myself and the person I choose to love to be whole and broken at the same time. Late that night, I called my mom again, and her voice reminded me that guidance often comes wrapped in simplicity. She didn't offer solutions or censure. She just reminded me to be kind to myself, to acknowledge the progress I've made, and to continue showing up with integrity. I thought about my dad, who always reminds me that the smallest preparations, the ties, the shoes, the attention to details carry a weight of care that builds over time. Their wisdom isn't dramatic, but it anchors me. And I realize that love, true love, is built in the same way, through small, deliberate, honest acts over time, rather than in single grand gestures. I reflected on the army, who have taught me so much about vulnerability and trust. Reading their letters, hearing their stories, I understand how human connection is a responsibility as well as a privilege. I began to see the pattern of my life more clearly. Every relationship, every interaction, even every small kindness or failure, is a practice for the person I want to become. My ex-girlfriend's invitation, her words, the awkward politeness, all became part of that practice. They reminded me that walking away doesn't diminish the value of what was. It reinforces the commitment to the future. In the days that followed, I spent time in the studio with music, movement, and reflection. I danced for myself, letting each step, each spin, each fall and rise translate the complicated emotions into clarity. I realized that the body has a language for honesty that words often fail to capture. Through movement, I could measure my own growth, witness my own steadiness, and feel the discipline I've been cultivating in real time. The act of showing up consistently for myself became inseparable from the act of preparing for love that is deep, authentic, and sustainable. I thought about the life I want to build, one that is steady, attentive, and grounded in genuine connection. I imagined a love that allows for imperfections, that doesn't demand performance, that asks for presence, patience, and the courage to be fully known. I realized that the future I hope for isn't built in leaps and fireworks, but in the quiet, repeated choices I make every day. Listening carefully, responding thoughtfully, honoring commitments, and practicing honesty even when it's uncomfortable. By the time night fell again, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The visit to her house hadn't ended well in the way I had imagined, but it had ended exactly as it needed to, with clarity, truth, and the recognition that walking away can be an act of love for both yourself and the other person. I understood that some endings are not losses, but preparations for the life we are meant to live. The past, with all its memories and lessons, exists to guide me, not to tether me. And so I sit here carrying the lessons and the gratitude, holding the ache and the clarity, ready to continue building the life I envision. Love, I understand now, is a practice, a discipline, a series of small acts performed consistently, patiently, and honestly. And I will show up for it every day with courage, presence, and all the quiet strength I have cultivated from every person, every memory, every step along the way. The door may have closed that night, but it has only made me more ready for the one that is waiting. The love that asks for my full self, and the life that calls for honesty, steadiness, and care in every moment. The following morning, I woke with a strange clarity that only comes after a night weighed by memory and reflection. The city was still quiet, the kind of silence that makes you notice your own heartbeat, your own breathing, and every thought that rises unbidden. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the sunlight creep along the buildings, painting the streets in gold and shadow. It felt like the world was holding its breath with me, like the city itself understood the subtle lesson of what I had faced the night before. I thought about her, my ex-girlfriend, and the house that held so many memories, the good and the difficult intertwined in the way life does. I realized that stepping into that space wasn't just about seeing her, it was about seeing myself, who I had been, and who I am now trying to become. I reflected on my parents and their steady guidance. My mother, with her quiet insistence on kindness and honesty, has always been a mirror I could look into, even when I didn't like what I saw. My father, with his careful attention to the smallest details, taught me that preparation and care are forms of love. And then there's my family in BTS. Jimin, who listens without judgment and offers a shoulder without expectation. Taeyoung, whose wonder reminds me to notice beauty in the smallest moments. RM, who asks the questions that make you confront yourself. Jin, whose humor softens the hardest moments. Suga, whose quiet observation guides without words. And Jae, Hope, whose energy reminds you that joy is a practice as much as effort. Their presence in my life is a constant lesson in connection, patience, and authenticity, showing me every day that relationships are maintained through consistent care, not performance. I thought about the army and how much their letters, their stories, their trusts have shaped me. Each message, each confession, each shared joy and sorrow has been a lantern. In moments when I felt unseen or uncertain, they taught me that showing up consistently is a form of love and that the practice of attention is what builds bonds that endure. Reflecting on all of this, I understood that the visit to my ex-girlfriend's house was another form of practice. It was a test of my presence, honesty, and compassion, reminding me that love, real love, requires both courage and clarity. It reminded me that walking away can be an act of respect for myself and for the other person when the timing or the alignment of lives no longer serves growth and authenticity. In the studio that afternoon, I let the music take over. I danced for hours, each movement a dialogue between my body and my heart, translating confusion, pain, and clarity into rhythm and flow. The mirrors reflected not just my movements, but my emotions, and I saw the steadying effect of showing up for myself. I realized that love and presence are learned in these small, deliberate acts: listening, noticing, responding thoughtfully, moving with attention and care. I thought about the cracks in that teacup from her kitchen, and it struck me. Imperfections do not diminish value. They are part of the story, part of the capacity to hold warmth and care. Love, like that cup, holds fragility and strength at the same time. As evening fell, I walked through the quiet streets again, letting the night absorb my reflections. I considered the type of love I am preparing for, the one that asks me to be fully present, to practice patience, to embrace honesty, and to consistently show up even when it's uncomfortable. I imagine a future where a partner is seen, understood, and accepted fully, imperfections included, and where the shared life we build grows from the daily practice of these values. I realized that the visit didn't end well in a traditional sense, but it ended as it needed to, with honesty, understanding, and the gentle reminder that walking away can be an act of love that protects both the past and the future. Back at home, I journaled every thought, every feeling, and every intention. I wrote about the discipline of love, the commitment to authenticity, and the courage required to face one's own emotions without fear. I wrote about the life I hope to build, a life of steady love, deep connection, and meaningful presence. I reminded myself that the best acts of care are not dramatic, but consistent, deliberate, and attentive. I wrote about my gratitude for the lessons of the past, the clarity of the present, and the hope of the future. I wrote about the love I want, one that is sustained not by fireworks, but by daily practice and genuine attention. That night, I called my mom. She asked simple questions, the kind that cut through noise and confusion. Did you eat? How are you feeling? Are you being kind to yourself? Her words anchored me, reminding me that care doesn't have to be grand to be profound. I thought about my dad, who always emphasizes the small steps, the preparation, and the attention to detail, showing me that love is built from small acts repeated over time. I felt gratitude for the network of care around me, for the people whose presence teaches me to be better, to notice, and to act with intention. By the time the city lights dimmed and the streets emptied, I felt a steadiness I hadn't felt before. The visit to her house had been difficult, yes, but it had clarified something essential. Honesty and clarity are more important than comfort or nostalgia. Love requires courage, presence, and a willingness to be seen fully. It requires carrying the past without letting it dictate the future. It requires practice, attention, and the patience to grow into the person capable of sustaining deep connection. And so I move forward carrying gratitude for the lessons, clarity from reflection, and hope for the future. I am preparing myself to love with authenticity, to practice care in every small act, and to meet the person I hope to spend my life with fully present, steady, and honest. The past has its place, the present asks for attention, and the future waits for the courage. I now have to show up every day. The visit didn't end well, but it ended truthfully, and truth is the foundation of everything I hope to build. Love, connection, growth, and the courage to fully embrace life as it comes. The days after that visit were filled with a quiet kind of reckoning. Each morning, I woke and let the sunlight filter through the blinds, tracing patterns on the floor, as if the universe itself was reminding me to pay attention. I brewed tea and sat in the stillness, letting my thoughts wander without trying to control them. I reflected on how much I had grown, and how much more I had to learn, not just in love, but in life. I thought about my parents, their steady guidance, the way my mother's concern feels like a protective net, and my father's careful attention is a blueprint for patience. I thought about BTS, how each member holds a piece of me accountable. Jimin's quiet understanding, Taeyoung's wonder, RM's probing questions, Jin's humor, Suga's silent wisdom, J-Hope's boundless energy. They had all taught me, in ways big and small, that connection and presence matter more than performance. I reflected on ARMY too, on the countless letters, messages, and stories that reveal their trust in me, their willingness to be vulnerable. Each of them reminds me that showing up, truly showing up, is a practice of love. Their dedication teaches me that the small, consistent gestures are what create enduring bonds. In that context, the visit to my ex-girlfriend's house became another lesson. It reminded me that facing the past requires courage, honesty, and clarity. Walking away from a memory, from familiarity, from something that once felt permanent, can itself be an act of love. Love for myself, for the other person, and for the future I am shaping. I returned to the studio that afternoon, letting the music fill the space and my body respond to it. I danced slowly, deliberately, feeling every movement as if it were a conversation with my own heart. The mirrors reflected not just my physical self, but my emotional state. The tension, the release, the awareness that I was learning to carry the weight of memory without letting it define me. Each gesture became a practice in presence, a rehearsal for the kind of love I hope to cultivate, a love that is patient, attentive, honest, and steady. I thought about the teacup in her kitchen with its hairline crack, holding warmth despite its imperfection. I understood that this is what I want in love, integrity and care, even when things are fragile or flawed. As evening approached, I walked the city streets, letting the cool air calm my racing thoughts. I reflected on the kind of relationship I want, one built on authenticity, presence, and shared values. A partnership where imperfections are embraced, where honesty is the default, and where daily practice of attention, patience, and kindness is the foundation. I realized that the visit hadn't ended well in the way one might hope for it had ended truthfully. That truth, though uncomfortable, offered clarity. Walking away had allowed me to honor both the past and the future, to accept what was and prepare for what is to come. Back at home, I wrote in my journal, capturing every emotion, every lesson, every intention. I wrote about the discipline of love, about showing up consistently and attentively. I wrote about the life I hope to build, one marked not by grand gestures, but by small, meaningful actions. Listening, noticing, responding thoughtfully, practicing honesty even in silence. I wrote about my gratitude for the lessons of the past, the clarity I had gained in the present, and the hope I hold for the future. I wrote about the love I want, one that is sustained by daily practice, not performance. Later, I called my mom. Her voice was grounding, her questions gentle but incisive. Did you eat? Are you being kind to yourself? Are you taking care of your heart? Her words reminded me that love and care are often simple, quiet, and persistent. I thought about my dad's advice about the importance of preparation and attention to detail. These lessons weren't dramatic, but they anchored me. They reminded me that love, like life, is built from small, deliberate, and consistent acts. By nightfall, I felt a steadying in my chest. The visit had clarified something fundamental. Honesty and clarity matter more than comfort or nostalgia. Love requires courage, presence, and the willingness to be fully seen. It requires carrying the past with respect without letting it dictate the future. It requires practice, attention, and patience, the discipline to show up consistently. I realized that the cracks in relationships, in objects, and in people are not weaknesses. They are opportunities for care, for presence, and for growth. And so I move forward, carrying the lessons from that night and the days after. I carry gratitude, clarity, and hope. I am preparing myself to love authentically, to practice care in all interactions, and to meet the person I hope to spend my life with. Fully present, steady, and honest. The past has its place, the present demands attention, and the future awaits the courage I now have to bring. The visit didn't end well in the way my younger self might have hoped, but it ended truthfully. And truth is the foundation of the love, connection, and life I am determined to build. In the following days, I found myself thinking constantly about the lessons from that night. Every memory, every echo from that room seemed to carry a message I hadn't fully understood before. I realized that love isn't about rekindling the past. It's about being honest with yourself and others, about who you are, what you need, and what you can give. I thought about my parents, their guidance, their insistence on integrity, their patience with my mistakes. My mom's voice, always careful yet full of warmth, reminded me to be gentle with myself. And my dad's quiet wisdom reminded me that small, deliberate actions accumulate into meaningful patterns. I thought about BTS and how each member continues to shape the person I am. Jimin's empathy teaches me to be aware of subtle emotions. Taehyung's curiosity reminds me to appreciate wonder. RM's insights push me to articulate truth. Jin's humor keeps my heart light. Suga's quiet observation fosters understanding. And J-Hope's energy shows me how joy can be intentional. Each of them is a mirror reflecting aspects of myself I sometimes overlook. Their presence reinforces that connection is cultivated in everyday moments, not just dramatic gestures. I returned to my volunteering with renewed focus, noticing the small, consistent ways I could be present for others. Lifting boxes, organizing meals, speaking to people who trusted me for brief moments, I realized that each act, however ordinary, was practice for the love I hope to build. It is through these repeated, mindful actions that presence, compassion, and attentiveness become second nature. I understood that love is not just a feeling, it's a series of deliberate choices to act with integrity, kindness, and patience every day. That night, I went to the studio and let music guide me. I danced slowly, deliberately, letting my body express emotions that words could not. Every movement was a conversation with myself, a negotiation between the past and the future. The mirrors reflected my effort, my tension, my release, and I saw that love, like dance, requires practice, repetition, and attention. I thought, again, of the teacup with the hairline crack in her kitchen. Fragile, yet still able to carry warmth. Imperfections do not diminish value. They are part of the capacity to hold care. I wanted my love to be like that, steadfast, attentive, honest, and gentle. As the city lights blurred outside, I reflected on the kind of relationship I want. One where presence, honesty, and shared values outweigh performance and expectation. One where imperfections are embraced, where consistency replaces spectacle, and where courage and clarity guide every interaction. The visit to her house had ended in a way that was not satisfying to the heart that hoped for reconciliation, but it had ended as it needed, truthfully. Walking away had allowed me to honor both the past and the future, giving me the clarity to continue building the life and love I want. I wrote in my journal late into the night, capturing each thought, feeling, and intention. I wrote about the discipline of love showing up for the small, ordinary acts with consistency, honesty, and care. I wrote about the life I hope to nurture, built not on grand gestures, but on attention, patience, and authenticity. I wrote about the lessons of the past, the clarity of the present, and the hope of the future. I wrote about the love I want, one sustained through practice, daily presence, and genuine attentiveness. I called my mom once more, and her voice was grounding. She asked gentle, precise questions. Are you eating? Are you being kind to yourself? Are you noticing your own heart? Her guidance reminded me that love is often simple, quiet, and patient. My dad's advice about preparation and care also resonated, showing me that love is constructed through deliberate, small, repeated actions. Their wisdom anchored me. I thought of my brothers, my friends, my army, and the people who have shaped me, and I realized that this steady network of care teaches me how to love thoughtfully and consistently. By nightfall, I felt a subtle steadiness return to my chest. The visit had clarified what is essential. Honesty and presence matter more than comfort or nostalgia. Love requires courage, vulnerability, and consistency. Carrying the past without letting it dictate the future is necessary for real connection. Cracks in people, relationships, and objects do not signal failure. They are opportunities for care, patience, and growth. I move forward carrying these lessons: gratitude, clarity, and hope. I am preparing to love authentically, to show up consistently, and to embrace the person I hope to build a life with fully and honestly. The past has its place, the present demands attention, and the future awaits my courage and commitment. The visit didn't end well in the way my younger self might have hoped, but it ended truthfully, and truth is the foundation of the love, connection, and life I intend to cultivate. The following morning, I woke with a stillness that felt different from sleep, the kind of quiet that presses gently against your chest and forces reflection. I made tea and sat by the window, letting the first light of the day trace patterns across the floor, thinking about the night before, about her, about the house, about everything I had carried in my memory and in my chest. I realized that stepping into the house wasn't simply a visit, it was a confrontation with my own growth. It reminded me how far I've come, how far I still need to go, and how love is as much about understanding yourself as it is about understanding another. I thought about my parents, their voices echoing in my head, my mother's careful, insistent kindness, my father's subtle wisdom, and the way they've always taught me that integrity and attention are the foundations of care. I thought about my brothers in BTS, about the lessons each of them offers without meaning to. Jimin, whose empathy allows him to hold space for pain and joy alike. Taeyoung, whose wonder reminds me to notice the extraordinary in the ordinary. RM, whose probing questions push me to articulate my truth. Jin, whose humor softens life's sharp edges. Suga, whose quiet observation teaches me awareness. And J, Hope, whose joy reminds me that happiness is intentional, not incidental. Their presence is a constant mirror, reflecting what is possible in love, friendship, and life. I spent hours reflecting on ARMY and the countless ways their trust, their vulnerability, and their shared stories have shaped me. I realized that love, like connection, is not performed but practiced. Each act of attention, each gesture of care, no matter how small, becomes part of the discipline that sustains relationship. That night, my visit to her house crystallized that understanding further. Some love must be acknowledged, honored, and then released. Walking away can be an act of care, both for the other person and for yourself, and it requires honesty, clarity, and courage. Later, I returned to the studio, letting music and movement translate the emotional weight into something tangible. I danced deliberately, each motion, a reflection of tension, release, awareness, and intention. The mirrors did not judge, they simply reflected me back, imperfect but striving. I thought again of the teacup with the hairline crack in her kitchen, fragile yet capable of holding warmth. That image became a metaphor for the love I hope to cultivate: steady, honest, attentive, and compassionate despite imperfection. As evening descended, I walked the quiet streets, the city lights blurring into streaks that reminded me of memory and possibility intertwined. I imagined the kind of partnership I want, one built on authenticity, patience, shared values, and the consistent practice of presence. The visit didn't end well in a way my heart might have wished, but it ended in a way that mattered. with clarity, truth, and the reminder that walking away can protect both the past and the future. Back home, I journaled late into the night, capturing my reflections, intentions, and the lessons I wanted to carry forward. I wrote about the discipline of love, about showing up for the ordinary acts of care, and about the life I hope to build through attention, consistency, and authenticity. I acknowledge the past, embrace the present, and envision a future grounded in courage and presence. I wrote that love is sustained not by dramatic gestures, but by small, meaningful actions repeated daily, performed with integrity and attentiveness. I called my mother once more, her voice gentle yet firm, guiding me without commanding. Her questions: are you eating? Are you being kind to yourself? Are you noticing your heart? Reminded me that love is often simple, quiet, and persistent. My father's teachings about preparation, consistency, and care reinforced this. I thought about my brothers, my friends, and army, all of whom hold me accountable, reflect my growth, and teach me to love thoughtfully. These connections are a practice in presence, patience, and integrity, the very foundation of sustainable love. By nightfall, I felt a subtle steadiness settle into my chest. The visit had clarified the essentials. Honesty and clarity matter more than comfort or nostalgia. Love demands courage, presence, and vulnerability. It requires